the number of boats will multiply enormously. Of all the people who see the Great Barrier Reef, no one gets closer to the fish and the coral than scuba divers. There's no better way to experience the reef, and divers are probably the most committed of all reef users to the ideals of conservation. Such close contact makes the average diver highly sensitive to the beauty underwater. But even the most experienced and careful enthusiast is far more clumsy than a fish, and the coral ends up damaged. Dive schools throughout the Barrier Reef specialise in giving first-time divers a trip to the coral.
Just put head in water, just there.
One of the biggest sources of new divers in the north is Mike Ball Water Sports in Townsville. It's an ultra-modern facility with a capacity to mass-produce new divers. From the start, students are encouraged to have fun, enjoying the unique layout of tunnels and shafts in the dive tank, or startling passers-by through a porthole to the street outside. 1,500 new students a year become qualified from this school alone, and a few days after their first lessons in the pool, they're on a boat to the outer reef. On their very first ocean dive, the novices are swimming among the fragile corals. The popularity of recreational scuba diving is increasing all the time. Like so many other tourism-related industries, diving is booming, and that means many more first-time divers on the coral reefs.
We dive responsibly here, I think. You know, it's really sort of drummed into us that you've got to be careful, you've got to watch out for the animal and plant life, because this is their home. I think if small things get broken, it's a great shame, and hopefully we can somehow repay it by looking after it for the years to come.
Well, it's just accidental. I obviously feel bad about it, but sometimes you can't help it, we're out of control.
With so much reef, the amount of damage seems negligible. But Americans have seen their reefs decimated by diver impact, and they're taking a tough line.
That's correct. We have started a program now where we are enforcing a regulation that has been on our books for a number of years, and that is actually when a diver makes contact with the corals unnecessarily, we issue citations. We have even initiated a program where our officers dive underwater and actually give the tickets underwater to the violators.
Billy Causey and fellow Marine Park manager Mike White cringe at what we overlook as acceptable destruction. They've seen what a concentration of divers on a small area can do in time. It's a warning against complacency, especially about the places that are most accessible.
There would be some minor damage by divers, so it is something we need to be aware of. I think the damage would really be quite minor compared to the crown of thorns starfish. They're doing a massive amount of damage. The damage the diver would do would be like damaging one cornflake, whereas crown of thorns would be eating the whole pack of the cornflakes.
And that's a subject that causes more arguments on the Barrier Reef than any other topic. Scientists have launched 57 different research projects into this one creature. Well, the individual crown of thorns certainly looks the part of a Barrier Reef villain. It's ugly enough for the role, and it looks menacing. Those spines will easily pierce human skin, and they're poisonous. And to top it all off, the way the creature feeds on coral sounds positively disgusting.
Yeah, well, it looks disgusting when you see it, but effectively what they do is the stomach, which is in this area here, actually is thrown outside the mouth, So it's very much like us getting our stomach and trying to push it out through our mouth. And then the stomach is thought to secrete an enzyme which actually digests the coral tissue, only the tissue itself, not the skeleton. And so what you end up with is just a white coral.
That's what's left behind.
Just the skeleton.
Behind their advance, vast areas of reef are left grey and lifeless looking. Scientific views over why there are plagues of crown of thorns cover virtually every shade of opinion.
The question of whether that has been affected by human activity or it's a natural cycle or a natural recurrent event still has not been answered, even though we've spent $3 million investigating that question, and we're still spending $750,000 per year on addressing that issue. So until we know the answer to that question, we must mount that as one of the most important questions.
Whatever proves to be right, the effects in the short term are devastating, though opinion now leans toward the view that the reef will grow back. After a serious infestation has passed, the reef will be completely recovered with coral in 12 to 15 years. But it won't be the same. Some corals take hundreds of years to grow, and they won't be back in our lifetime. The further north we head, the less we see the impact of people on the reef. Lizard Island. It marks the most distant point on the reef where facilities have been built for tourists. The remoteness of this delightful island and the strictly limited numbers at the resort have saved Lizard from the excesses of overdevelopment and the damage that comes with crowds. The island has won a reputation around the world. The guest list is always well endowed with the names of the social elite. The resort is less than 1% of the island, most of it's national park. But even such a remote and largely untouched spot has raised an important issue regarding the preservation of the barrier reef as we know it. The issue in question was raised not on the island, but an hour away on the fringing reef. A spot near a sometimes treacherous piece of ocean called the Dynamite Passage. With 4-metre waves crashing across the reef, Dynamite lived up to its name. A rough place to stop just to meet a family of oversized fish. Divers from the island feed them whenever they can get through. But this time, they hadn't had a free meal for days, and it certainly showed. These clownish-looking, friendly giants are potato cod. The conservation issue with this group of delightful fish is that they came close to being wiped out. The colony was discovered by divers Ron and Val Taylor, who started the taming process that's made the cod welcome human visitors to the small patch of reef they've made home. And that ease of location and trusting nature led a group of fishermen to plan a trip here that would have killed them all. A marine park zoning was rushed through to declare the spot off limits to fishing. While there are reports of potato cod like these elsewhere on the reef, nowhere are they as friendly and trusting as these. They've come to rely on hand feeding, and so has a large moray eel. So anxious for a feed that he comes right out of his hole to jam his head in the food bucket. The dive staff at Lizard Island are proud of the cod hole, and they feel strongly about the protection of places like this, where the fish are something special. While every effort has been made to keep the almost deserted feeling of Lizard, elsewhere on the barrier reef, they've gone to other extremes. One island has even been turned into a suburb of a city. Magnetic Island, a short ferry ride from Townsville, is typical of what happens when a place is opened to a variety of uses. Residents commute to the mainland for school, shopping or a job in the city. And on the island, they mingle with day trippers and holiday makers. But when an island is neither one thing or another, there can be conflict.
It's going to be bulldozed and excavated.
All levels of government and the Marine Park Authority are caught in the middle of a row between residents and developers who want to reclaim a pretty bay to build a resort hotel. It's an example of what we'll see right along the Barrier Reef coast, wherever the interests of developers and tourism clash with permanent residents.
This is our beach.
You can't blame them for wanting to keep their quiet life in these unique suburbs on the edge of the reef. Parts of the island are as built up as any suburb in any city in Australia. But the fact remains that Magnetic is an island on the Great Barrier Reef, and its closeness to the mainland is by no means unique. So what we see around us here could well be a pointer to the future for many other parts of the reef. One of the closest islands of all is without a doubt a treasure within a treasure. The island of Hinchinbrook, part of the Barrier Reef, and at present the world's largest island national park. Hinchinbrook is probably the closest island of any along the coast with the potential for development. At present, it's almost entirely national park with a small, low-key resort. National parks can and have been changed. Land is routinely rezoned along the coast and on the islands for tourism. Though it has been proved that public pressure can make governments change their minds over projects that affect the environment.
It's inconceivable that in today's world, where the public understands the importance of protecting the natural areas, that these national parks would be abolished. And so the existence of the national park status for many of the islands of the reef under Queensland legislation is thorough protection.
However, of around 900 islands on the reef, only 186 are national parks. Less than 1/4 of the total have that protected status. In the future, our treatment of Hinchinbrook and the other islands will be an important piece of evidence when we're judged on how we've cared for the Great Barrier Reef.
It's revolutionary.
Indexed bond market.
The biggest and one of the most important environments of the Great Barrier Reef is also the most misunderstood. To many people, the mangrove swamps are smelly, muddy and uncomfortable. True enough, but in the wider view of the reef, they have an important place.
We believe that they're very useful environments as a nursery ground for a very wide range of juvenile fish, and particularly the commercial prawns.
A walk through the mangroves with researcher Kevin Boto gives you a new appreciation of these areas that bridge the transition from dry land to the waters of the reef. If you stop, wait and look closely, there's hidden life to be found down in the black ooze among a mass of tangled roots. One of the surprising things about mangroves is that they can be a lot more than just swamps. They can also be forests. Mangroves can grow to be very large trees by any standards, with a canopy as thick and as high off the ground as any rainforest on the mainland. Tall mangroves like these are used as commercial timber in other parts of the world. The potential is there for us to do the same. Mangroves even grow in the coral. Places like Low Isles off Port Douglas, where plants have become established on and around the cays. Ever since the European settlement of Australia, mangroves have been wrongly regarded as nothing but a nuisance, clutter on the shoreline that ruins what otherwise would be perfectly good waterfront land. They've been cleared and reclaimed for everything from parks to canal housing estates and boat marinas. But if we lose the mangroves, we also lose a major industry.
Probably your barramundi, your banana prawns, endeavour prawn, trawling industries and recreational fisheries in the inshore area. But you could ruin your game fish industry as well, and that would be a very severe blow to the North Queensland economy.
The situation deeply disturbs the fishermen, and in Cairns, their main base is right next to a government project that's destroying more mangroves. Ironically, some of the new facilities here will be used by rangers who patrol the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park.
They do pieces at a time. People don't see it happening a little piece at a time. They call that progress. They'll knock them down and take away the breeding grounds for our prawns, and it'll just go on and on and on.
The fishermen feel they've been turned into scapegoats for practically everything that's gone wrong with the reef.
They can see us knocking the industry around and knocking the seabeds around and ruining reefs, but really we don't, because it's our livelihood and we need it. And if